Good morning, and welcome everyone in the auditorium and viewing our live internet broadcast to the USDA 2019 Pride Month Observance. I'm Jeremy Wood, the National LGBTQ+ Special Emphasis Program Manager for NRCS, and I will be your MC for today's program. At this time, would everyone please stand for the presentation of the colors by the Joint Armed Forces Color Guard, the singing of our national anthem by Tremaine Wilson, Special Emphasis Program Manager for the National Agricultural Statistics Service, and the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Brent Elrod, Special Emphasis Program Manager for the National Institute of Food and Agriculture.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight, all the ramparts we watched, words so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave? Oh, the land of the free and the home of the brave, of the brave.
Good job. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Up, right shoulder, off. Up, upward, walk.
Thank you to the Color Guard, to Tremaine, and to Brent. You may be seated. "1924. the Society for Human Rights, the first known gay rights group, was formed in Chicago. 1947, the State Department begins firing suspected homosexuals. By 1955, more than 1,200 men and women had lost their federal government jobs in a time known as the Lavender Scare. 1950, the Mattachine Society is formed. 1958, the first East Coast chapter of the Daughters of Bilitis is formed. 1955, Barbara Giddings and Frank Kameny and others picket to protest government discrimination of lesbians and gay men. June 1969, after repeated police raids at the Stonewall Inn, a bar considered one of the only LGBTQ+ safe spaces in the city, unrest spills into the street and begins 5 days of protests. June 1970, the first official Pride. The Christopher Street Liberation March commemorates that first anniversary of Stonewall. June 1978, the rainbow flag flies as a new symbol of LGBTQ+, of LGBTQ+ pride above San Francisco's Gay Freedom Day Parade. 1982, AIDS is recognized as a disease by the CDC after being referred to as the gay plague for years, while having devastating effects on the LGBTQ+ community. Compton's Cafeteria, Black Cat Tavern in Los Angeles, Cooper's Donuts, the Sip-Ins at Julius Bar in New York City, the Gay Liberation Front, and ACT UP. These are touchstones that all in some way have shaped the modern movement for LGBTQ+ equality. We remember and pass down these stories because to know where you're going, you must first recognize where you've been. We celebrate pride, we honor our roots. 1993, the Minnesota State Legislature enacts the first statewide law banning discrimination against transgender individuals. 2003, the Supreme Court rules in Lawrence v. Texas that sodomy laws in the U.S. are unconstitutional. The Massachusetts Supreme Court also rules that barring same-sex couples from marrying violates the state constitution, stating in that ruling, the Chief Justice concluded that to deny the benefits, protections, and obligations of civil marriage conferred by civil marriage to same-sex couples is unconstitutional because it denies dignity and equality of all individuals, making them second-class citizens. 2000, Vermont becomes the first state of the country to legalize same-sex civil unions. 2004, Massachusetts legalizes same-sex marriage. 2009, the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act is passed. 2011, the Don't Ask, Don't Tell Repeal Act is passed, allowing LGBTQ+ service members to serve openly in the U.S. military. 2015, the Supreme Court rules that same-sex couples have a constitutional right to marry, and marriage equality becomes the law of the land. Protections for transgender and gender nonconforming individuals, workplace protections for LGBTQ+ employees, increased visibility and support of communities of color and individuals with disabilities, and moving past the goal of equality to one of equity. These are the progress of the present and the horizon toward which we set our sights. We celebrate pride, we grow our future. At this time, please welcome Darren Ash, the Assistant Chief Information Officer for the Farm Production and Conservation Business Center. With us today on behalf of Melissa Drummond, FPAC's Chief Human Capital Officer, who is unfortunately unable to be with us. Melissa has proven to be a steadfast ally to the LGBTQ+ Special Emphasis Program, and her dedication to diversity and inclusion in NRCS and FPAC has been a great asset to the organization, and we thank Darren for delivering her remarks today.
Well, good morning, and welcome to USDA's 2019 Pride Observance Program. Thank you, Jeremy, for that kind introduction. Where did he go? Thought he was right behind me. I am honored. Obviously, Melissa could not be here today, and she sent her regrets. I am honored to be the agency leadership representative who addresses you today. And as Jeremy said, I do work in the FPAC, the Farm Production and Conservation Mission Area, and I know that the Undersecretary and the other USDA leaders throughout our complex and the nation, thank you for your support for our mission, which is do right and feed everyone. and your realization that to carry out this mission, we need a diverse workforce made up of all people, our greatest asset. Our theme today, Honoring Our Roots, Growing Our Future, allows us the opportunity to celebrate several key anniversaries of note. Jeremy mentioned the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall event, the 25th anniversary of USDA Globe, now Equality USDA, as well as the 10-year anniversary of the LGBTQ plus special emphasis programs at the department. I don't want to go any further without recognizing all those who played a part in today's program, and I'm asking if we can all give them a round of applause. On behalf of leadership, I also want to give a warm welcome to our keynote speaker, Mr. Mark Siegel. When you read his bio, you can appreciate his accomplishments, which include being one of the most influential civil rights activists in U.S. history. Many of you know that this country has been blessed with many civil rights activists who have exhibited passion and made many sacrifices, including giving their own life to ensure equality in this country. So we thank you, Mr. Siegel, for your selfless acts. I firmly believe in the merit system principles. There are 9 of them, but let me read 3 of them to you right now because of their significance and their relevance to today's event. First, recruit, select, and advance on merit after fair and open competition. Treat employees and applicants fairly and equitably, and maintain high standards of integrity, conduct, and concern for the public interest. This is how we try and manage and carry out all of our programs, and I would encourage each of you, supervisor and non-supervisor, to perform your duties as a public servant. I would also say that our federal workforce needs to represent the diversity that exists within our country. When employees feel supported and valued based on their diversity and not in spite of it, they are more likely to be engaged and productive. Obviously, the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey, which is open right now, is meant to capture this level of engagement and is an important source of information for this and all other special emphasis programs. How can we have an engaged workforce? I believe we need a positive work environment that models behaviors that foster trust and equality. We can encourage each other by showing how we are valued and support our workforce when possible with opportunities for growth and recognition. Most importantly, we want to allow each and every one of us to take pride in our work. Thank you.
Thank you, Darren, for bringing Melissa's words and your own sentiments to us today. Next, please welcome Lanice Lago, the Associate Chief for the United States Forest Service, who is here to share with us her personal story.
Good morning. Welcome. I'm Lanice Lago. I'm the Associate Chief for the Forest Service, and I'm proud to be here today on behalf of the largest employer in the Department of Agriculture. So when I was asked to come and speak, and they shared the theme, Remembering Our Roots, it got me thinking about my own roots. So I want to tell you a story about my first year as a federal employee in the Forest Service. So I was stationed in Missoula, Montana. I moved there from Washington, D.C., spent all my life on the East Coast, and this was my first experience west of the Mississippi. I was alone, and in order to build a community and have some support, I joined the University of Montana's Lambda Alliance. It was a gay lesbian support group based out of the university, and I was a little bit older than most of the other people who were part of the group, but it did fulfill that essential function of some support and some social networking. It was really important. And I would also say that because I was a little older, I had a bit more experience and perspective, and so I shared that with the group. And possibly it was because of that, 8 months passed, and they asked me to be a speaker at a rally they were holding on the university for National Coming Out Day. And I guess I was flattered I said yes. And then I started thinking, what could this lead to? As I say, it was my first year in federal service. I didn't really know what the merit protections, which you just heard. I wasn't clear on that. And importantly, in Montana at that time, there was a sexual deviancy code on the books, a state law that prohibited certain acts between same-sex people. It was a felony. And so in my naivete, I started wondering, could I lose my job because, I come out as a lesbian publicly? And, I got pretty worked up about it, and I finally decided, well, I'm going to talk to my supervisor. So I invited him to coffee. I didn't want to have this conversation in the office. And he agreed, and I tell him sort of hesitantly at first, but then going faster and faster. I joined this group at the university, and they're having a rally next week, and they asked me to be a speaker, and it's for National Coming Out Day. And he just, I saw him getting tenser and tenser, and then he just kind of relaxed, and he said, "Oh, thank heavens, I thought you were going to tell me you joined Earth First." Thank you so much for laughing. I told a colleague that story yesterday, and she's like, "What's Earth First?" So if you don't know, it's an environmental activist group. I'm not sure that they're still active, but at the time, they were protesting a lot of Forest Service activities. And so in that moment, the idea that what he was really worried about was I could be an environmental activist is really funny. But he went on to tell me that he's a member of the Sioux Nation, and he told me the word for it in Lakota, which I don't remember, but it means two-spirited people. And in his culture and in his experience, there is a explicit recognition that people come into the world as they are, and it was normal and accepted and nothing to be ashamed of. What I felt in that moment was accepted and supported. And what I've thought about since then is, well, what would it be like if we weren't taught to be ashamed of who we are when we come into the world? I went on and made the speech. A lot of things have changed since then. Jeremy went through a great litany of the progress that we've made. That sexual deviancy code isn't on the books in Montana anymore. A friend of mine who's a lawyer still living in Missoula led the fight to repeal it. And of course the Supreme Court has recognized gay marriage. There are gay, lesbian, transsexual, queer, plus artists, celebrities, sports, professional sports stars, politicians, civil servants. And what I continue to believe is it's one of the most important acts for us to make this a better place to live and work is to be out and open and just who we are. And it's important for us who identify as LGBTQ+, but it's also important for people who are allies to be open about their support as well. I'm proud of who I am. I'm proud of my agency for supporting me, promoting me because of my talent. I'm proud of my agency because last year we unveiled our 5 corporate values, one of which is diversity, another of which is interdependence. And the importance of those two is diversity is recognizing the inherent value of every person, and interdependence says, and we need each other. I'm proud of USDA for this event. I'm proud and grateful to you for attending. Thank you so much.
Thank you to Lenise for coming today and sharing your story for us. We're very proud to have you representing the agency and leadership as well. At this time, please join me in welcoming my dear friend and often the other half of my brain, President of Equality USDA, Megan Walter.
Thank you, Jeremy, and thanks to everybody for coming today and those of you joining us on the line. On behalf of Equality USDA, welcome to an historic Pride Month. My name is Megan Walter, and I am proud to be the president of Equality USDA, our LGBTQ+ employee organization here at USDA. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. By day, I am the state hydraulic engineer for the Natural Resources Conservation Service in Portland, Oregon. Thank you to all of our speakers today for sharing your time with us. And thank you to the sponsoring agencies who partnered with us on this event. In the program, you can see a very long list of our sponsoring agencies. If I took the time to read this long list, it would eat up the time for my remarks. So instead, let me say thank you. Thank you to all of our sponsoring agencies for showing up and supporting us. We are very proud that so many USDA agencies want to show their support for our LGBTQ+ employees. And let me take a minute here to check in about language this morning. We use the acronym LGBTQ+ to represent the range of sexual orientations, gender identities, and gender expressions present in our world, including but not limited to lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, questioning, pansexual, two-spirit, gender nonconforming, non-binary, intersex, asexual, and ally. The word queer may give some in the audience pause because this word has historically been used as a slur. Over the last couple of decades, the word queer has been reclaimed by many who feel that their gender identities, gender expressions, and/or sexual orientations are not represented by the acronym LGBT. The term queer is considered by many to be an inclusive term because it is not specific to any particular sexual orientation or gender identity. It's also important to acknowledge that there are many within our LGBTQ+ community who do not use the word queer, they do not like it, and they will never use it because it's been a source of pain to them. And so we honor that and we hold space for both the positive use of this word queer and its historic connotation. You may not understand all of these identities that I listed, but know that Equality USDA is here to walk with you on your journey to becoming an ally, to becoming an accomplice, and to learning more about sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. I will meet you where you are and walk with you on the path to compassion and grace in understanding LGBTQ+ lives. Our mission at Equality USDA is to foster a work environment free from discrimination and harassment based on sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression. We often do so in partnership with the LGBTQ Special Emphasis Program. Prior to 2017, Equality USDA was known as USDA Globe. While our name change is relatively recent, our history is long. USDA Globe was established as a recognized employee recreation and welfare organization in 1994, as witnessed by then Assistant Secretary for Administration, Wardell C. Townsend. USDA Globe stands for Gay, Lesbian, or Bisexual Employees. In June of 2017, our members voted to change our name to Equality USDA to reflect our own growing understanding of our community. Those who founded USDA Globe were instrumental in getting sexual orientation added to USDA's Civil Rights Policy Statement in 1993. Back in the late 1980s and early 1990s, Globe chapters were starting up across the federal government. These organizations are the roots of our work to create a welcoming workplace today. The vision of Equality USDA is a workplace where each employee can grow their own destiny, no matter who you are or whom you love. As we stand here today in this moment, we are a vision of our ancestors' dreams. That we could walk the halls of USDA serving openly as LGBTQ+ federal employees is a vision that people like Frank Kameny dreamt about, a right that he fought for. I now understand how much an event like this means to our employees in rural areas. Because visibility matters. To be seen and acknowledged matters. To see senior leaders from our agencies step into the spotlight and support us. To see that you can be an out queer kid from Iowa standing on the stage of USDA, speaking directly to the hearts of our LGBTQ+ employees across rural America is monumental. If you pull back the pomp and circumstance of this moment, at its core, this is a vision of USDA that our predecessors dreamt about. This is a version of USDA that our LGBTQ+ employees need, both young and old, to see a reflection of themselves and us. As a young civil engineer, starting with NRCS, I thought my legacy would be measured by the pieces of paper hanging on my walls, the degrees, the engineering licenses and certificates that I hung to mark the milestones of my career. I know now that my blessing is to speak for those who cannot speak for themselves, and that is what I am here to serve. I'm here to stand in my convictions, our convictions, that USDA is a place for everyone, no matter who you are or whom you love. My legacy is not measured by the yards of concrete poured, by the miles of salmon habitat restored, or by the number of dams rehabilitated. My legacy is the words and actions I have left hanging on the hearts of our LGBTQ+ employees and customers. My legacy is the safe space we have created at USDA, from USDA Globe to the LGBTQ Special Emphasis Program to Equality USDA. And that is a legacy that makes me very proud to be in service to the American people. For those of you watching who may not be out yet, know that we will be strong for you. We are strong enough to carry you with us until you are ready to make that journey on your own. We will keep the light on for you so that you can find your way. And then you will be the next generation to keep the light on, to make your own legacy and manifest this dream of a USDA where each employee can grow their own destiny, no matter who you are or whom you love. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. Now, to present this year's Equality USDA Shining Star Award, and for the introduction of our keynote speaker, welcome Kimberly Kelly, Special Emphasis Program Manager for Food Safety and Inspection Service, and Vice President of Equality USDA.
Megan has me a little touched up here. Okay. Hello, everyone. Happy Pride. Happy Pride. Honoring our roots in the LGBTQ+ community is about growing community and growing a movement. Emphasizing milestones along the way is not only important, it's necessary. As Martin Luther King Jr. stated, we are not makers of history, we are made by history. To truly honor the past and current progress of our movement, we must fully understand the steps in history that kept the movement parading forward. So we must honor our roots to grow our future. Today I've had the distinct honor of presenting the Shining Star Award on behalf of Equality USDA. Historically, the Executive Board presents an award to 1 to 2 individuals that have gone over and beyond in their LGBTQ USDA advocacy. But on this auspicious anniversary, we have decided to shake things up a little bit because there are more than 1 to 2 individuals that deserve this recognition. In 2019, Equality USDA presents the Shining Star Award to all of those that have served in the LGBTQ plus special emphasis program management role over the last 10 years. In keeping with the Equality USDA tradition, behind me you will see a portion of the video project that we have in the works, capturing a few significant pieces of our special emphasis program history. For many observances, Equality USDA, formerly known as GLOBE, created these video postcards from the field. That's what Bill Ailey, our previous president of GLOBE, used to call them. Today marks a dynamic day of remembrance. 10 years ago this month, the former Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack, signed into existence the LGBTQ plus special emphasis program at USDA. Since 2009, thousands of USDA employees have devoted their time and talents in support of educating and advocating for the inclusion of LGBTQ plus employees and customers. These efforts all contribute to ensuring that USDA is an employer of choice and a welcoming workplace where employees can bring their full authentic selves to work. And you can see just a glimpse of the dedication employees have shown proudly as they serve as LGBTQ plus communities across rural America. Research by Boise University concluded that LGBTQ plus employees are 30% more productive if they feel their employer is welcoming and inclusive and where they can bring their full authentic selves to work. So providing customer service begins with our employees. The LGBTQ plus special emphasis program, along with Equality USDA, have been working hard to grow USDA into the welcoming workplace we desire and that we require. The LGBTQ plus special emphasis program has two examples that prove the hard work of our special emphasis program. In 2016, the Secretary of Agriculture received the Audi Award from the Out and Equal Workplace Advocates for creating inclusive spaces for LGBTQ plus federal employees. In 2018, USDA received the Ag Influencer Award from the Cultivating Change Foundation for our work in making agriculture a more welcoming workplace for our LGBTQ plus farmers and customers. At this time, I would like for every current and former LGBTQ plus SEPM to stand, raise your hand, or otherwise give yourself an inner round of applause. And for those of you on the live internet broadcast, we encourage you to stand in your cube or your office or out in the field and give yourself a pat on the back. You are all Equality USDA's shining stars, all of you, and we thank you very much for your hard work. If it wasn't for your endless efforts, our history would not be as rich and our future would not shine as bright. Equality USDA is continuing to build the video tribute through the month of June as we commemorate this momentous year. Here is your opportunity to contribute. We are still accepting submissions to complete our project. So for more information on how to contribute a photo, please refer to today's program for Equality USDA's contact information. And so one last time, let's give a round of applause for all of our LGBT SEPMs. And now I have the very distinct honor, I'm kind of geeking out a little bit, but I have the honor of introducing today's guest keynote speaker, Mark Segal. Mark Segal is the founder and publisher of the Philadelphia Gay News. He served as president of both the National LGBT Press Association and the National Gay Newspaper Guild. In 2015, he published his memoir, And Then I Danced, traveling the road to LGBT equality. In 2018, the Philadelphia Gay News was named one of the national's best weekly newspaper by the National Newspaper Association. While Mark is an accomplished author, publisher, and journalist, he is also an important and influential person in our civil rights movement. Mr. Segal was a participant of the Stonewall Uprising in New York City in 1969, which you have heard much about today. He was the founding member of the Gay Liberation Front, founder of the Gay Youth, and member of the Christopher Street Gay Liberation Day Committee, which created the very first Gay Pride in 1970. We are very proud and honored to have Mark Segal with us today, so please help me with welcoming Mark to the stage.
Good morning. Oh, you could do a lot better than that. Good morning. A little better, but we'll try and see what we can do. So I was sitting there, and I think if I stand over here, you can hear me. Am I correct? Trying to get back in the group. I think you feel better without a microphone. And if you got the microphone to hear that, I want you to say that I am slim and I am fit. And I'm 20 years old. So let's go back to that time. And speaking of the my roots are also your roots. 50 years ago today, if I wanted to speak to you, we're going to be able to work with the California Nation. From the agriculture, I can go to a local I know today pronouns are extremely important. Oh, very nice. Yeah. But I'm very simply, in 1969, I was just a gay man. So let me tell you how I got to Stonewall, because in many ways it's your story. So when I was growing up in the 1950s and late 1960s, if you were gay, you didn't know what that was. There were no gay people on TV. There were no characters, no news people. It was not even mentioned. It basically was invisible. There were no talk shows that had gay people on them. None at all. You were not mentioned in the newspapers. You were not mentioned or seen in magazines. To churches, we were immoral. To law enforcement, we were illegal. And you couldn't be a teacher, you couldn't be a lawyer, you couldn't be a doctor. We were an invisible group. And for me growing up, it was, how do I find out who I am? And so if I wanted to do that, the only place one could do that is go to the library. And you might find 5 books in the library. And if you read those 5 books, which were hidden, you might discover that you were mentally incompetent. You might find that you're a degenerate, but you won't find anything that says you're okay. Now, as an 18-year-old kid growing up in counterculture 1960s, that didn't speak to me too well. And it didn't speak to me too well when the first network television show, special CBS News reports on the homosexuals appeared, hosted by Mike Wallace, on CBS TV. In 1967, as a 17-year-old child, I watched how gay people had their faces pixelated because gay people couldn't be on TV. And so during that hour-long broadcast examining what is a homosexual, every single one of those homosexuals was sad, depressed, being arrested or being put in a mental institution. I looked at it and said, that's not me. And so the following year, I was going to graduate high school. And I was thinking, that's not me, and one never talked about people like me. What is the problem? And I realized, of course, at that time, obviously I was the only gay person in Philadelphia. There were no others. So I had to go somewhere where there were gay people. And everybody knows there's this place in New York called Greenwich Village where all the beatniks and hippies are. And so I figured if beatniks and hippies were there, maybe there were people like me. So May 10th, 1969, I left Philadelphia and moved to New York. I had no money, no prospects, and no job. I moved into the YMCA. First night there, I took a subway train, went down to the village, and there was no map that said, gay people over here! You had to walk around the village, and luckily, if you were lucky like I was that night, I found Christopher Street. Christopher Street was the place in 1969 where gay people lived and survived. And the minute I got there, I just looked and said, I'm home. A few weeks later, I discovered there was an organization called Mattachine. At that time, in 1969, literally, there were only less than 100 out people in all of the United States of America. 100. Mattachine was a place where some of those people were. There were about 10 organizations around the country, and these people hung out in a place called Mattachine, Daughters of Bilitis, One Incorporated, and other such organizations. So I walked into Mattachine, and within 5 minutes I was told to leave. I was 18 years old, and they asked me to leave because they were afraid if I walked into that building, they would be raided by the police for corrupting the morals of a minor. That's what it was like in 1969 in New York City. As I was walking out, I met someone who became very influential in my life, a guy by the name of Marty Robinson. Marty said to me, he was in his early 20s, you know, we're going to create a new type of gay organization. It was 1969. Well, we had one meeting, nothing much came of it until June 28th, 1969. So, as an 18-year-old kid, like kids today of 18-year-old, they hang out at the mall. I hung out on Christopher Street. Our evening, and every single evening was like this. You'd walk up and down Christopher Street. You'd stop in the Silver Dollar restaurant for maybe a cup of coffee if you could afford it. And by the end of the evening, you always ended up at Stonewall. And the reason you always ended up at Stonewall was it was different than any other place you could possibly go. On the street, on Christopher Street, the police still walked the beat. The police still came by in cars. And if they saw you holding hands, you could be arrested. If they saw you showing any sign of affection, you could be arrested, you could be harassed. People came from all over the city of New York to beat up the fags and the dykes. That happened in our own home on Christopher Street. But when you went in the Stonewall, it was different. It might have been a mafia bar. They might have served watered down drinks. But when you walked in there, you could do several things. You could hold hands. You could kiss. You could show affection. More importantly, for an 18-year-old kid, you could dance your ass off. That night, I like to say Friday, June 27th, going into the early morning of Saturday, 28th, the police came in. I was a young kid from Philadelphia. I looked like the kid next door. On page 13, there's a picture of me, and if you look on that page, you'll see a guy on the right-hand side holding a paper bag. That is what I looked like in 1969. That photo was taken 3 weeks after Stonewall. Notice the hair. Notice I was adorable. But I still am today. Or my husband thinks so, at least. The lights flickered. They then went on full force. Police came barging in. They slammed people against the walls, primarily anybody who was stereotypical. They hurled insults. And anybody who looked like they had a few dollars, they would ask them to take out their wallet and take the money and put it in their pocket. Extortion in plain sight. The police were stealing from us. That is how they felt about us. That is how society felt we, as a people, could be treated. One by one, they began to card people. I looked like the kid next door. They had no use for me. I had no money. So I was one of the first to be let out. I went across the street and watched as the evening developed. One by one, they carded people. Eventually, there were more of us outside than inside the bar. But the most interesting thing I noticed was that anyone that stayed were street people like me, drag queens, butch dykes, and the trans people of the day, people of color. We were the ones who stayed because we had nothing to lose. And that was our home. That was a place where we could dance our ass off and be free. The only place we could be ourselves. So as the police emptied the bar, eventually they were the only ones inside with the workers. We were more outside. So they came, opened the door after they'd gotten all the money they could and everything they wanted to do and wanted to leave. And they opened the door and saw this crowd outside. And they said, get away, disperse. We didn't. They tried that a second time. Get out of here. We started hurling insults to them. They did it the third time. We said no, at which time we picked up anything that was around us. Stones, empty cans, whatever. The police, for the first time in history, were imprisoned by gay men and lesbian women and trans people. They, who had imprisoned us for years, for the first time, we had them trapped. Now, there's a very interesting timeline that David Carter tells in his book, Stonewall. There was an hour until they called for reinforcements. And everybody scratches their head and says, why was it? And I think I have the simple answer for that. If you were a policeman who felt that they could go into a gay bar, push gay people around, and extort money from them your entire life, how would you call your station house and say to your fellow officers, oh, please help me, there's these faggots and dykes outside, and I'm afraid of them? Well, it took an hour. During that hour period, things were thrown at the door. We barricaded the police in the bar. Windows were broken up and down the street, and people started running around. It was a joyous circus occasion. We were happy. We found that we had power in number. We found that we could do something for the first time. Let me digress a little and tell you a little about a woman by the name of Fanny Weinstein. Fanny Weinstein was my grandmother, and she is my inspiration. Fanny Weinstein came to this country with her family because her village was burned down by the Cossacks in Russia. That was known as a pogrom, and the Russians on occasionally would like to wipe out Jewish villages. She came to America, and as a young girl, she became a suffragette and fought for the women's right to vote. When I was 13, she took me to my first civil rights demonstration. So when people say, I'm a fighter for civil rights, I believe that it's in my DNA thanks to Fanny Weinstein, and I give her all the credit for that. So standing outside of Stonewall that night and watching all this craziness around me, I have my light bulb moment. My light bulb moment was, it's 1969. Blacks are fighting for their rights. Women are fighting for their rights. Latinos are fighting for their rights. What about us? What about me? It was at that moment I decided I would be a gay activist. There was no name for it at that point. Gay activists didn't exist. But I was going to do that and dedicate it my life. And here's the funny part. There was no salary for a gay activist. So I literally thought that at 68, I would be a bag person, a homeless person. But I didn't care. There was a passion that many of us had that night that defined what we'd be doing the rest of our lives. The most magical thing I could tell you about Gay Liberation Front is tell you that that man I told you about, Marty Robinson, came up to me. And he said, here's a piece of chalk. To this day, I'll never know where he got the chalk. And he said, I want you to go up and down the streets of Christopher Street and write on the walls and on the street, tomorrow night Stonewall. Very simple. I did that. This went on for hours. And as I did that, I was beginning to wonder why. At one point, police wagon came by and took some people off. I was not there for that. I was not there for most of the window breaking because I was writing on the streets and walls. I was there when a drag queen put a feather boa on General Sheridan across the street. But that was what kind of happy moment it was. It was so cheerful to be doing something to fight back. So those little statements, tomorrow night, Stonewall, created the second night of Stonewall. Second night of Stonewall, Martha Shelley and Marty Robinson spoke from the very step of a shattered Stonewall. The third night, we were leafleting on the street about Stonewall and our future demonstration. The fourth night, we were doing legal alerts about the police. That was revolutionary. It was illegal for gay people to congregate in public. We were defying the police every day. We were saying, we're taking back our street. And that photo on page 13 is the first gay liberation demonstration. Gay Liberation Front is born from the ashes of Stonewall because those people writing on the street the night of Stonewall, those people speaking in front of Stonewall, and those people marching 3 weeks later are all Gay Liberation Front. Gay Liberation Front probably was the most important gay organization that has existed to today. Also probably was the most dysfunctional, and I'm proud of that dysfunctionality. Give you an example of how dysfunctional we were. We did not operate by Robert's Rules of Order. We had no officers. When you came in at night, a stick was thrown in the air, and whoever caught the stick, they were the chairperson for that night. But let me tell you what we did in that first magical year. First thing we did was self-identify. We said that society would no longer be able to label us. We would label ourselves. That word homosexual was put up on the shelf. I became a gay man. Others became lesbian women. Some became dykes. But we were going to self-identify ourselves. Next thing we're going to do, we would never be invisible again. You've seen the Come Out poster that's very famous. We shot that. We also said we're going to be loud, proud, and in your face. No more disappearing into closets. We created in that 1 year the first gay youth organization in America. We created that first year the first trans organization in America. We created that first year legal alerts to our community. We created that first year medical alerts to our community. We created that first year the first LGBT community center. If all of that alone were not enough, we demonstrated against the media. We demonstrated right outside the police headquarters. We took the battle to them. Then, at the end of 1 year, we decided to celebrate that whole first year and Stonewall, and we created Christopher Street Liberation Day Committee, the world's first gay pride. And so for me, on my 50-year journey, I could sum it up by telling you something that happened to me a year and a half ago. I was in a little city called Siem Reap, Cambodia. I was there because I wanted to see an archaeological ruin called Angkor Wat. I went into a restaurant that evening, and on the table next to me were 4 men, 2 gay couples I later found out. One of the couples said to the other couple, "Oh, in a couple weeks you should come to Taiwan. We have Asia's largest gay pride. 1 million people come out." In 50 years, we took this community from less than 100 to millions. And in 3 weeks from now in New York, they're expecting to have 3 million people celebrate gay pride. And I'm proud that Gay Liberation Front So that is my story. I'm happy to have shared it with you. And I'm so proud to see so many people here who are allied in this agency, because while I might have been part of those roots, you definitely are part of the future. Thank you. Is that okay? Oh, and tell them I have cards here if they want for my book. Okay, got it. Thank you.
All right, we have some cards for anyone who's interested in a copy of the book that we'll put them out on the table in the lobby. So thank you so much, Mark, for being here with us today. I don't know where my papers went, but to provide some closing remarks with us today, we have Barbara Rader from the National Agricultural Statistics Service, who will close us out this morning. So thank you for coming.
Thank you, Jeremy. I'm Barbara Rader, Director of USDA's National Agricultural Statistics Service, Census and Survey Division. Today we gathered to celebrate USDA's multi-agency LGBTQ+ Pride Month observance. We respectfully honored the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall Uprising and the 10th anniversary of USDA's LGBTQ+ Special Emphasis Program. I clearly remembered the first LGBTQ event that I attended. It was actually held right here in this auditorium, and I was sitting in the back row. Mind you, in my 35-year career, I've attended many special emphasis programs, including the Hispanic Heritage when that first got kicked off, as well as many, many others. But this event was different. As I walked out of the auditorium, a dear friend asked me, "So Barbara, what did you think?" And I told him that I loved how everyone in this room had a place at the table. The LGBTQ community is motivated by a strong desire of acceptance and embracing of all. Today we celebrated together. Last but not least, I'd like to thank Megan Walter, President of Equality USDA, all the event speakers and organizers, Rachel Pittman, for the lovely programs and posters, and our keynote speaker, Mark. Thank you so much for sharing your powerful story. I've been fighting back tears, actually, the entire event. And thank you, NASA's very own Tremaine Wilson, for a beautiful rendition of the national anthem and for the gracious invitation to close out this wonderful event.
Thank you so much for being with us today, Barbara. This concludes our program today. Thanks again to all of our speakers and everyone who's joined us here in the auditorium and on our live broadcast. As we honored our roots, and now we go forth to grow our future. As always, happy Pride.